Showtime.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Rosie and Bill Show. Our guest this week is a successful business owner and consultant, recently turned author. His fictional tale, The Adventures of Jimmy and Andrew, American Stonehenge, has recently been released. So we'd like to welcome to the show tonight, author Mike Goldstein. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're really excited because, generally we do a lot of singers and actors and things like that. But, writing is an art form. And so we're really happy to have you here, especially in the genre that you write, which is fantasy. How did this all come about and what inspired the book?
Actually, I've always been a storyteller, and I spent a lot of time telling my kids stories and reading them stories. And my grandson, when my grandson was little, I did the same thing. And these stories actually came out of stories that I told him. When he moved to a different state, he would call me every night for a Poppy story, is what he called me, Poppy. And I would just make up stories for him based on things that he would bring up. And then I would try to, a lot of times, include him in the creation of the tale. And one of his favorite story adventure series that we talked about, or I told, was The Adventures of Jimmy and Andrew. And back in about 2008, my former wife and my daughter said that I should put these stories in writing. So that was where it started about 13 years ago. And I'd written a lot of nonfiction, and I just recently published my first nonfiction, but I'd never written fiction. So it was a challenge, and it took a while to kind of learn how to put it down and to communicate that way. In other words, at first, I had the stories, but they were more informative than artful, because I was used to writing the other. So, and that's how they came about. That's how The Adventures of Jimmy and Andrew came about.
I just want to add to that, because years ago when my niece was little, I remember being in her kitchen and we said, oh, she wanted me to tell her a story. I said, well, how about we do something together? I said, give me a character. What do you want her name to be? Where do you want the story to take place? And what do you want to, give me a subject. And we thought, just for like an exercise, really. And then, so then I said, okay, well, let's write a little story. And so I ended up writing like a little children's book, which I did nothing with. But the point is, things can develop that way. So what made you come up with the names that you came up with, and the fact that it was this fantastical story where they communicate telepathically? I mean, it's just really fascinating to me.
First of all, like you probably already read, that the story is about a 9-year-old boy who gets to pick out a dog from the Humane Society. And it turns out that the dog he gets is over 3,000 years old and can speak with him telepathically. And which is a very interesting way. What goes on between the two of these characters is so much of the book. But then in this book, they embark on their first adventure, which takes place in the remote forests of northern Washington, where a newly discovered site of an exact duplicate of Stonehenge in England is found. And it's completely intact. So Jimmy's archaeologist parents go up there to excavate, and they take Jimmy and his new mutt, which is by the name Andrew, up there. That's not the name he named, and that was his name when he adopted him. So this is their first adventure, and then they have to go up there and unravel this mystery of this particular book. But the book, since it takes place, and this is going to be the same way in all the books, is that you get the current adventure, but it goes back and forth between that and previous episodes in Andrew's long life. since he's been walking the earth for 3,300 years. So the way I came up with it, I don't know. I don't really remember how I based the character on my grandson, who is exactly the same age as Jimmy. He was born on the same day, and he was 9 years old when I wrote the book. He's 23 now, but he was 9 years old when I wrote the book, and when I told him the stories, I should say. And the dog, Andrew, is based on a mutt that my father adopted from the pound when we were kids. And like Jimmy's father tells in the book, my father said what he did is he went to the pound and he didn't pick out the dog, he let the dog pick him out. So he picked out this orange and black mutt who was actually a female that we named Duchess, but the dog was extremely intelligent, and you could swear that the dog understood everything you said. He could do tricks that nobody would believe. So I kind of based the character of Andrew on that dog. Of course, our dog couldn't speak telepathically and only lived like 10 years, but that based it. And the character of Jimmy was based on my grandson. As far as the names, he came up with those. Because like you involved her in the story. I said, what should the boy's name be? Jimmy. What should the dog's name? Andrew. And then he also contributed to the look of Andrew, where you see in the book, Andrew has one blue eye, one green eye, one brown eyebrow, one gray eyebrow, two black, looks like he's wearing boots. That was all my grandson. So that's how he did it. And then, so we told lots of different stories. I told him lots and lots of stories. And this is kind of the first adventure.
One question I have, Mike, right off the bat is, because you actually had another question in terms of how long it took to write. You kind of already touched on that already, starting back in like 2008, 2009 timeframe. But since your grandson played such an integral part in this, what was his reaction like when it was finally done and published? Like, what was the impact on him and your relationship with him after seeing it all come to fruition?
Well, it's been kind of, you understand, it didn't take me 13 years to write the book. It took me a year.
Okay.
And I was doing it, on my part-time when I could do it in the evening. So it took me a year to write it. But it's taken up until recently to actually bring it to where it is now. And that's a long story. And that's what it reminds me. When I was looking at your Facebook page, I think it was, just a little ways down, there's something that you write there that's right here on my wall or my desk. Never give up. You have it on your Facebook page, just a little ways down, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's the
never
thing.
Give up, and it's never too late.
Never too late. You never give up, never quit, no matter what. That's it. I've had a dream for this book and books, this series, actually. The second book is also, it's already written and in the final stages of editing and starting the third one. But this book here is what's been, so his reaction was wonderful when I actually, when we finally got it published, which was not that long ago. I mean, he lives in Israel, so I sent them the book there. Yeah.
He must be very proud of you.
Yeah, I think he probably is. I'm very proud of him. But it was really a great collaboration. So it's a very special to me, and that's why I had an idea of how I wanted to do this book, how it had to be done, how it had to be illustrated, and I spent a while trying to work with publishers to get it done that way, and finally just decided if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it myself. It's going to do it right. So I started my own publishing company, and then that's what took a long time to really produce the finished product. Okay. I mean, I may have had it written, but I needed to have an editor, and that was finding the right person, which was somebody with 30 years experience in the New York publishing business who taught me how to be a writer.
Well, and I appreciate you clarifying that, because again, like, I just automatically assume that, 12, 13 year time frame, but that is, kudos to you for hanging in there and doing all that needed to be done to take what only took you a year to write, but then all those years after to bring to fruition. That's a lot of intestinal fortitude and passion to make that all happen.
Thanks. It's almost, sometimes I would feel like, I must be crazy, but what the heck, it was almost like just to have to keep going on. I had a very specific idea of what I wanted it to look like. And then the people that, I owe so much to the team of people that worked with me on this, because it sure wasn't just me. Okay. First person was the editor, like I said, Mary Jarrett. And she's really like more than an editor. She's a teacher and a mentor. And when I went to her to have her do this, I was already through the second book. I had all my attention on that. I never wanted to look at Stonehenge again. Right? I've been through it 1,000 times. Okay, here, I need a professional edit. So you do that, and she said, no, how am I going to do it? I'm not the author. I don't know what you want. I said, well, I thought that's what you want. I says, she asked me, do you want that kind of an edit or do you want a real edit? And that's where you do it. So she would send it to me, and here's the problem. She would spot any problem, and then I had to correct it, which is what taught me. And the first time, even I said, I've been through that book 1,000 times or more, and I had several other eyes on it. And when I got it back the first time, the manuscript, which I had to send to her, the actual manuscript, every page was red. It was like, and then we went through that 5 times before she could read through that book, and nothing hung her up. And then it was done. That took a year. It took me as long as it took to write it.
Well, it sounds to me like you had this vision and you weren't deterred from it. You were not going to compromise that vision. So as Bill said, that's really commendable. Talk to us about the other part of the creative process, which was finding the illustrator.
Well, I had this idea, this vision that I wanted to have a full page illustration of the major scene from every chapter. And I had pictured it as, black and white. In fact, I'd actually thought of an artist that I liked, that I remember from long ago, by the name of R. Crumb, who, I don't know if you know who that is, but he wrote in the 60s. Anyway, he was, I even tried to contact him. I just had this idea, but I even worked with a couple, but I couldn't figure out how, we never could get past the characters. Nothing looked right. So I went to this friend of mine who produced my first book, my nonfiction book. And I asked him, can you help me find an artist? And he said, yeah, I can do that, because he's a genius. He can do, this guy's amazing. His name is Zax Dow. His actual name is Scott Dow, but he goes by Zax. And what we did is we went up online and we put together artist test projects, and we did it with artists all over the world. So we had these guys that were coming to us testing for, $25 or whatever to do a test project. And this took like months. I was working 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, just going through these, because then you go through their portfolios and then you select a certain amount of those guys that kind of look like it. Can they do it? Then you send them a test job. And Zach's designed the whole wonderful test jobs. And at that point, once we got that certain amount of people there we had in the finals, then we did a second test job. And we did this for several months until we finally found our artist, of all places, in Turkey. And he spoke English, young guy. And the strange thing is he did this like hand painted color technique in his tests. It was amazing. And Zach asked him, could you do this? He goes, I'd prefer to do this rather than, and Zach knew how to use the different tools that he was using and to train him in them better. So we took this guy in, and I don't know if you've seen you see in the background some of the illustration. And the guy was amazing. But we never met him. We worked with him online for 2 years. This is where Zach's had to train me so that I could communicate my ideas to the artist, because I'm the only one that knows what it has to look like. So I would have to go through the internet and find different pictures, and he would put together diagrams, and I would have to write it up in such a way that he could understand it. And then he would come back with a sketch. And then once the sketch is approved, then he would do a color rendering. And then we would, so the first, I didn't know how we were ever going to do it, trying to get through the first illustration. I was going, this can't be done. This is going to be impossible, because we had 33 illustrations to do plus the cover.
Wow.
And I said, it's impossible, but Zach says we can do it. So we just took one thing at a time, just one little thing, one little portion, because I wanted these illustrations to be exact depictions of the scene. Okay, and what made it really difficult, which I had no idea when we started, was that all of these have to be on a vertical page. So you have to put your scene on a vertical page, which is, you then have to do it like you're doing a scene in a movie. You're doing a cinematic view of that scene, which we had to do in a 3D rendering to give the guy to draw. It was, I learned so much doing this. I didn't know any of it before, but anyway. So it took, and the other thing, as we went along, I kept having ideas of what it should look like. I wanted these illustrations to be not at the beginning of the chapter. Every publisher for, I don't know how long, if you go there, they're going to put the illustrations at the beginning of the chapter. The reason is because if they don't, and they want to do it the way I do it, you end up with extra pages in the book. Nobody wants that. Well, I wanted that scene right directly across the illustration from the scene. So the guy's reading it and he can see the scene. So it's like a graphic novel. Otherwise, it's at the beginning and he's getting a preview. And if it's something exciting, you're already telling him about it. And then if he has to look, he's got to flip back. So then we had 16 extra pages, which we covered with scenes of the two characters at play. You know, so it's a fantastic, that was just the illustrations. Am I going into this too much detail here?
No, I'm fascinated.
Yeah, and one thing, Mike, that I'm thinking about, you touched on earlier about that you had written, some nonfiction works prior to this, but I'm listening to the passion and all that went into this. Like, how does this project and everything that went into this compare to your nonfiction works in the past? And what is it like when you look at the finished product? Because it's clear that you are so proud of, and you had this vision, like Rosie mentioned earlier, and you stuck to it. And just this process, like all that went into this, I'm just sitting here with my mouth hanging open as to how fascinated I am that you stuck with it and have ultimately got what you wanted and what you just said a moment ago you initially thought was impossible.
Well, there were parts there. Like I said, I had good people. That said, yeah, it's okay, we can do that kind of. I also had a good art director that kept the thing moving and kept me and the artist, doing his job. And that's one thing I knew that, I didn't know anything about the publishing business, but I knew it's the only way I could get the book done the way I wanted. And therefore I had to learn, and I didn't have time to go to school and learn all this. So I had to find good people that I could trust, like Zach's and like Mary and like Anil. But then you got to give them the ball. You got to trust them. I can't then, I got to let, he run it. You're the art director. You tell me what to do.
That is sometimes very difficult to relinquish all the control in certain areas.
Well, that's from my business background. That's the same thing. So it's that gave me my business background helped me form it like I would a company. That's all. And as far as the nonfiction, I wrote a lot of articles, but I only wrote one book. And the book that I wrote, I was as passionate about as this. And and if it wasn't for that book, I don't think I could have written this one, because then I knew I could actually write a book. Before that, I didn't think I could write one. I just written articles. Once we had the illustrations and the drawings, and we had all of that, now we have to put the book together. That was the next challenge. That was a big one. How do you publish it? How do you actually print it?
That's a lot.
That was, oh my God. Because
a lot to learn.
I'm very passionate about kids' literacy, children's literacy. With what we went through this past year, if kids could read, it would be, they would be able to learn anything if kids can read. And like my kids learned to read very young. My son was sitting down, was reading 17 books at 6 years old, because we read to him. And that's how we read. My wife read to those kids every day to where they want, here, Ma, I want to read a book. Well, why don't you go read one? Well, I don't know how. Well, here, I'll teach you. Or they did the same thing. My kids were taught in Montessori. So it was the same kind of an activity. So teaching those kids to read was the best thing. I mean, my son, and my daughter, they learned so much on their own. I mean, the one time I was called to school because my son ditched class. And I went there with the principal. We sat down with him. He was in junior high school. Where did you go? To the library. He was so bored with this class, he went to the library to study. I didn't know what to say. I said, good.
Okay.
I told the principal, you guys better get your classes more challenging. I'm not going to punish him.
Right.
And so anyway, this is the idea, to get the kids to read. And so I wanted this book to be like a fantasy, a thought-provoking fantasy, but also I wanted it to be educational. So all of the subjects being discussed in this book are factually and historically correct.
That was one of my questions. How much research did you have to do? And did you pick Egypt, him being from Egypt, from your travels?
Not from my travels, but I majored in anthropology and archaeology in college. I had other travels to places that I tie in, but I've never been to Egypt, but I sure have read a lot about it. And so, yeah, I pull from my own experience and from other research I did, and which is a lot of fun. And that included the illustrations. Like every illustration, the plants, the fauna, the flora are all correct. Everything mentioned is, in other words, there's no detail that a person can't go and inspect and see, or historically it'll fit in all of them. And that way because I want to encourage kids to be interested in history, archaeology, other literature, that sort of thing. And so then came the actual presentation of the book. So the book is 7.5 by 10 inches. So it's a big book. And I wanted nice big type. But then the type, was mentioned before, a lot of the book is telepathy. So I had to come up with a way of how do I communicate telepathy in the book, right? So I decided that that in the book, you'll see italics, and italics in this book, in this whole series, is only used in telepathic communication. You will not see italics anywhere else in the book. So, it's either bold or something else, but never, only for telepathy. And in the beginning of the book, I found that I could write something, and because I was testing this all along with people from the very beginning, having them read stuff. And so I'd have people read it, and I would write, Jimmy thought to Andrew, or he said to him silently, But as you go into the book, I stopped doing that, and I don't have to do it anymore because the person's eye automatically will know that it's telepathy. And I don't even mention what I'm telling you now in the book to anybody. I don't tell them that, oh, by the way, if you do it that way, people's eye just follows.
You talked about encouraging children to read and literacy, but there's also the process of the writing. If you were to go into an elementary school and talk to them about your process as an author and how it would be best, say, for them to structure it, are you someone who knew right off the bat what the end of the story was going to be? Or do you just start writing and see what flows creatively?
That's exactly what happens. Part of the problem I had with publishers for the second book is a lot of them said, well, we like this, but can you write a second one? And can we see a synopsis or an outline? I couldn't do it. Mm. I don't write outlines. I don't do synopsises. I sit down and I write, and I'm as surprised as the reader. That's what makes it so exciting and why I love doing it, because it just comes out. And then I might not know what's going to happen in the next chapter or the next paragraph. I mean, let alone the end of the book. I have kind of a general idea of things. Like for when I wrote the second book, I had an idea of it, but what it came out to be is nothing like that. It's just, I was so surprised. Now, then, of course, I go back and have to edit it and that sort of thing, because a lot of times as a writer, you're putting stuff in there like my editor says and writes so famously, who cares? Stuff that's interesting to me or that I thought, but it doesn't really fit the story, and somebody reading is go, what is that? And so yeah, who cares? So you got to get out all the who cares.
Right.
One of the things that happens to me when I write is I really kind of go to that place. It's like, to me, it's almost like a different universe where these two characters really live. So I can zoom in and see any detail I want of anything. So sometimes I put too much in there, and that's what I've had to learn, is to, get rid of stuff, weed it down, make it into a story. That's where the writing is coming. That's where I've really, as far as the ideas and doing it, that's nothing. I got so many books in my head. I don't know how many. I'll have to live a long time to write them all. But it's the editing, going back and doing that, which to me, working with this editor is as much fun as writing.
That sounds like a great fit and a great match. Now, Mike, before we go, I just wanted to ask you two quick questions for the benefit of our viewers. First is, you mentioned the second book is already done. So when will that be available? And for folks who want to pick up their copy of the first book, where and how can they do that?
You can get the book on Amazon, but you can also get it on our website at, you can see my hat, jimmyandandrew.com. And if you go to jimmyandandrew.com for this show, if the person at the, what do you call it? When they check out, that's it. If they put in the code Andrew25, they'll get a 25% discount on the book from this show. Okay. So just tell them.
Wonderful.
Yeah. If they, and you go to Jimmy and Ann. Now what's at the website is not only information on the book, but they can see a 4-chapter free preview in print replica of the book that they can see they cover the whole screen. It's beautiful. And they can read full 4 chapters illustrated, just like in the book. And so that's what's really nice there. And then you can get your 25% discount if you would.
Yeah, I want to read it.
I'm going to send you one after the show. Stick around, and I'll get your information.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
Sure. Definitely.
Sure. That's fantastic.
Maybe we can even do another show once you've read the book.
There you go. There you go. And then you're going to have another one. So there. Well, Mike, we thank you so much for coming on the show. Love to hear about this book and your process and all of it. It's just a whole nother world. So thank you so much. And we wish you all of the best. Folks, you get 25% off with the Andrew 25 if you order the book after seeing the show. So please do that at jimmyandandrew.com. And also The Adventures of Jimmy and Andrew, American Stonehenge. Mike Goldstein, thank you so much. Folks, we'll see you next week.